there's been a lot of time with sailfish where the fish is coming in and he's going to spear the angler. Yeah. And I just step in front of him, or my mate steps in front of him, and you just put both hands on the side of the fish and you push sideways.
Oh, seriously? Like Secret Service guy taking the bullet. You block the fish.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh my
God. You can't let the fish kill your angler. You don't get a tip.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey listeners, thanks for tuning in. Our show today is brought to you by JP Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one fly rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. And be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all the latest Destination Angler episodes coming your way. And thank you for telling your buddies about the Destination Angler Podcast. If you like the show, could you please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts? Coming up on the podcast, we're headed to Fernie, BC and the Elk River for some world-class cutthroat trout fishing. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on the West Branch of the Penobscot River with Aaron Broadus, Heading North Guide Service. Aaron takes us deep into the heart of the Maine backcountry for landlocked salmon. These amazing fighters are big-time jumpers, and the West Branch is the place to go for shots at trophy fish. And today our destination is a worldwide tour of billfish on the fly with Captain Jake Jordan of Jake Jordan's Fishing Adventures. Jake is one of the foremost experts in the world for taking marlin, sailfish, and spearfish on the fly. That's right, I said on the fly, and if you didn't think it was possible, think again. Captain Jake has traveled the world over for 50 years in search of these tremendous game fish, where he has personally caught over 4,000. Jake, now in his 70s, is a well-known speaker, author, and consultant to many rod, reel, and boating manufacturers. He's been featured in dozens of sport fishing magazines and television shows. He's a Fly Fishers International certified fly casting instructor and is a founding member of the IGFA, that's the International Game Fish Association Certified Captains Organization. He's revolutionized the art of taking billfish on the fly. Jake operates lodges and trained crews all over the world, including the Florida Keys, North Carolina, Australia, Hawaii, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and more. And speaking of Guatemala, man, let me tell you, this is the place to go if you're looking for shots at big Pacific sailfish. Jake's clients average 7 sailfish a day, and it's not uncommon for anglers to have shots at 25, 30, even 40 fish in a single day. When it comes to marlin fishing, the blue marlin is the king of them all. With fighting speeds of over 60 miles an hour, these guys are a total adrenaline rush. And Jake is doing it on a 20-pound class tippet with his drag set. Are you ready for this? At 1 pound. That's right, 1 pound. I know, hard to believe, but that's part of the secret of Jake's success. So let's listen in as Jake shares where you need to be, when you need to be there, and what you need to do to get a thrill of a lifetime chasing trophy billfish on the fly. So, Jake, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hello. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, here we are on a Saturday morning, and feeling really fortunate to have Jake on the line here to talk about fly fishing for billfish. And so, Jake, you're down in the Keys right now, right? And it's tarpon season. How's that going?
Yeah, it's right in the middle of our red hot tarpon season. Fishing's been really good. We've had some incredible experiences. I've had clients catch as many as 9 tarpon. These are big, full-size tarpon, not babies. These are 100-pound fish, and we've had as many as 9 in one 4-hour charter. I think I had 67 in the 22 days that I fished in April, and we're already up to 51 here in May, and it's less than halfway through the month.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you like to fish at night?
Yeah, I do. You know, I poled a flats boat here in the Florida Keys for like from 1965. I started guiding here in 63, but I started doing a flats fishing in 65, and I fished until about 2010 in a flats boat, and in 06 I started doing this nighttime fly fishing for tarpon. I used to fish out there when I was young with a plug rod, and I knew where all these tarpon that everybody fishes in the daytime, they all they're nocturnal feeders and they go up into channels where they feed at night. So I spend a lot of time out there at night catching them, and that's when they're feeding. So it's a lot easier on my clients catching the fish.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you've got it dialed in. And speaking of getting dialed in, let's talk billfish here. So let's just start at the top here. What is the allure of chasing, marlin, sailfish, spearfish with a fly rod for you? What is that?
Well, it starts out as with most fishermen. They start out catching whatever is their local species, and as they expand, if you read everything like I did for 50 years and study the fish, and you're obsessed with it, you have that fishing gene, you wind up trying to catch bigger fish, and then when you get good at catching bigger fish, you try to catch them on lighter tackle to improve your ability. It's not a lot of fun to have, catch a 2-pound fish on 20-pound test line. The fish can't break. He has no chance to get away.
Yeah.
So I have always worked my way down in tackle where, in the 1970s, I was catching bonefish and snappers and stuff on 2-pound and 4-pound tests. And the natural sequence was to go into fly fishing. And when I started here in the Keys, the fly fishing there wasn't very many saltwater fly fishermen in the world. So if you were working and I had a mentor that had quite a few fly fishing customers, and he used to give me the customers as backup. I was his backup guy when he was working. So, I got to fish a few fly fishermen, but I learned how to do it. And then it was probably the mid 1970s before there was enough fly fishermen that fished in salt water that you could become a full-time fly fishing guide. We were all fishing with bait and everything prior to that. So I worked my way up with the fish and worked my way down with the tackle and wound up in the fly fishing end of it, which is unique in that the rules of fly fishing, the maximum breaking strength of your class tippet in any class that you have in fly fishing is 20-pound test class tippet, which is the breaking strength of the line between you and the fish. So consequently, if you're catching, small like false albacore or bonefish or redfish or something, you're usually using, 6-pound or 8-pound or 12-pound test line for your class tippet, and the fish are going to be appropriately big enough that they could break that line. But when you get into tarpon and bigger fish, then you can only go up to 20 pounds. So you have to learn how to outsmart the fish.
Right.
And what I always was challenged by is to catch the bigger fish with the lighter line. And the draw obviously went to go. I was teaching people how to catch bonefish. I had a bonefish school from the 1970s all the way up to the 2000s where I was teaching people to catch bonefish on a fly. And it was a very productive business. And I was manufacturing fly reels at the time, and I had a fly shop. So it was creating customers for my fly shop, for the fishing lodge, and for buying my reels. So I learned that a bunch of people are not going to get good unless somebody shows them stuff. So I very early learned that I like sharing my knowledge with people. And as I was running my schools, then people wanted to go bigger. So they would catch bonefish, and then they would want to go up to permit and then up to tarpon. And then eventually they were looking for bigger, stronger fish. And what can you do but go in the ocean and look for bigger, stronger fish? And the thing that excites me about fly fishing for big fish that turns me on and then consequently turns on my clients are big fish that jump. So rather than hunt for tuna and amberjacks and stuff like that, I've caught them all, but I looked for the species of fish that are big, that are challenging, but that you cast a fly to. You watch them eat the fly, and then you watch them come out of the water. It's a whole different feeling than a fish that's deep. The reason that I still fish a lot of rainbow trout is that I love big fish to jump. So I don't do a lot of small rainbow fishing. I go to places where I can catch rainbow trout that are 25 to 35 inches long.
Just where is that, Jake? Is that in Alaska, or where do you go for that?
I spend most of my time in Alaska. I fished them in Russia. I've been down. I spent a lot of time down in Argentina fishing for big fish. But mainly I go every year. I've been going for like 50 some years. I've been going to Alaska and spending the fall up there hunting for that elusive 30-inch rainbow, and I've caught more than a dozen of them over 30 inches.
Oh my gosh, good for you. Are you saying that you're chasing big fish like Marlin with 20-pound tests too?
Oh yeah. The
20-pound test. Wow.
20-pound class tippet is the top in the rules for fly fishing, which is printed in the International Game Fish Association book every year. Those rules were put down. A group of fly fishermen back in the day of Lee Wolf and Lefty Cray and Stu App and a lot of the older guys, they got together, they formed a group, and they nominated a guy by the name of Mark Sosin, and he actually sat down and penned the rules. They all voted on them, and they started the rules of fly fishing. And these are just basic rules, so that in any sport you have to have rules of the game that if you're going to compete with somebody, you're competing with yourself or with anyone else. Everybody's on a level playing field.
Gotcha.
So that's where the weighted lines and the leaders and all the rules are spelled out in there. And pretty much all good fishing guides know those rules and they follow the rules. For me, when I was growing up, it was like if you were trying to be a fishing guide and take people fishing and you did not know the rules and you accidentally caught a fish that was the biggest fish of that species ever seen anywhere in the world, and you had a leader that was too long, or your knots weren't right, or you had 25-pound test line on a fly rod, and that fish that was the biggest one ever caught will never be in the world record book, and the guy's picture won't ever be in there because the guide had the wrong tackle. You would be just drummed out of the industry. You would never ever be able to do it again. You'd be written about in magazines and laughed about.
Oh my gosh.
So you had everybody has to learn those rules and know exactly what they are, and that's what I've done my whole life is promote
play by the rules,
fishing within the rules, and then if you catch, I know of people. I have people that are out there right now that go out and they take a fly rod and they take a fly reel and then they put 100-pound test line on it and they get a big fly and it looks like a bait fish and they troll it and they hook a fish and they reel it in and they think they're fly fishing. They're not really fly fishing. They're catching a fish the hard way on a fly rod, but they're not fly fishing. They're doing it just as much fly fishing as I would be doing if I just had a stainless steel cable with a power winch bolted to the boat and put a fly on the end of it and had them eat the fly when I was trolling along and push the button and the power winch pulled the fish in and I gaffed him and killed him. That's just as much fly fishing as what these guys think that they're doing when they're fly fishing.
So you're keeping it sporting.
Yeah. And everybody that does it knows that, if you travel the world and you get on the boat with my captains and mate and you say, hey, I want to use straight 50-pound, well, they're going to try to talk you out of it, because if you're using straight 50-pound or straight 80-pound or something and you hook a fish and you get that line wrapped around your finger or your neck or your leg, it's going to cut that limb off as that fish runs, because you won't have that safety link in there that's going to break.
Oh, interesting.
So that link in there at the end, that class tippet is not. They say, well, I don't care about any records. Yeah, you don't. But what if you got a fly rod and you make a cast, and you're stripping the line, and then when it comes up, it's wrapped around your toe, and that fish takes off, and the line can't break, and he just pulls that gel spun backing around your toe and tightens it down. It'll just cut your toe off.
Hadn't thought of that. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, I've seen it happen. I've also seen them get the get the fly line when they make the cast, get it caught around the handle of the reel or around the back of the reel or wrapped around the rod, and just yank their $1,000 rod and reel out of their hand.
Yeah. Extra tab at the end of the day for that one, huh?
Exactly.
Hey anglers, if you get excited about fly fishing, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. Being outside nurtures your soul. If holding a fish of any size is like gold to you, if you believe that a fly rod should be a reflection of yourself and what you love, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. JP Ross produces many types of handmade fly rods, over 7,000 since 1997, and they are best known for their small stream collection and their passion for building relationships with their customers to help them be happy by being outside. I had a chance to fish one of these little gems recently in Michigan and was blown away with its performance, beauty, and effortless casting. For all you saltwater anglers, JP Ross has a 9-foot 8-weight saltwater ready rod that you're going to love. JP Ross himself was featured on my recent podcast on the Adirondacks, so check that out when you get a minute or two. And you can check out JP Ross fly rods at, you guessed it, jprossflyrods.com. If you know how many fly rods you have, you don't have enough. So put a smile on your face and pick up a JP Ross fly rod before your next trip. Get outside and simply fish. Well, let's shift gears from it and tell me about the different species of billfish that you're chasing around the world.
Well, when I started down here in the Keys, we have blue marlin offshore here, Atlantic blue marlin, and we have white marlin, and we have Atlantic sailfish. They're the three species here. And then there's also swordfish, which are very difficult on the fly, but we do have them. But I started out down here in the Florida Keys when I was chartering. I had an offshore boat, and I used to go out by myself. I used to read all about this stuff, and guys were, were catching a few billfish on fly. So I would take my tarpon gear and I'd go out here on the reef and try to tease them up and cast to them. And the Atlantic sailfish were the most plentiful. I mean, we could catch them on bait out here pretty easy, but they're smaller than the Pacific sailfish. These sailfish out here are, 25 to 60 pounds. And what I found was that they don't have a very long attention span. They'll tease up, but before you can bring them in and throw the fly to them, they usually peel off and they're gone. So what I came up with was we do a thing here called kite fishing, and we always did it with bait where you can anchor on the reef in a northeast wind, and the wind is blowing from land out off of the reef, which is 5 miles offshore, and you're in like 15, 16 feet of water, and 20 feet from you, the water drops off to 150 feet. So what we would do is we had a kite that we would put up that's like a square kite, a fishing kite. And then as you put it up, you would have a snap swivel partway up the kite line, and you would run your line through that snap swivel, and that was being held on with like a release clip from an outrigger. So then you would run it up. So you put a bait like a yellowtail snapper or a pinfish or something, and you sew it on for fly fishing, or you hook a hook on it through the upper fin, and you have the line running up to the kite and then down to the water. And what that does is it gets the bait, it holds it on the surface, but it gets it out away from where you're anchored, and it's in deeper water. And then you can actually raise and lower the rod tip and move that bait into the water or lift it almost out of the water so it's splashing. And then if you actually raise the rod tip, you pick the bait straight up toward the kite, out of the water. So you have that bait swimming there, and then you have your fly line all laid out, and you measure the distance so that you can cast to that spot. And then you just kind of let that bait swim around on the water splashing, and you'll see the sailfish come by and get excited and come in and charge it. And when he charges right at it and he's ready to attack it, you just lift the bait out of the water and he misses it. Then you put it right back in and he turns, and then you can see the colors change and the fish lights up, and he'll take a shot at it 2 or 3 times. And on the third time through, as the mate picks the bait straight up like 3 feet off the surface as he lifts it out of the water, you drop the fly where that bait was. And that fish just nails that fly.
Wow.
And when he feels that fly sting him, he jumps and goes crazy. So that's where I started. And then my wife and I had a fly shop travel business here in the Florida Keys, and we would travel and send people traveling. So, I started catching sailfish here, and I said, this is doable. And then I went to Panama and fished down there a couple times and caught a Pacific sailfish, and started going to Venezuela a lot. And in those days, you could go down there, and it was very American friendly, and you could fish. And there was a lot of crews down there fishing for. We had blue marlin, white marlin, and sailfish down there, and swords. And I would go down, and I would always, we were down there fishing with heavy tackle, big game, but I would always take my fly rods with me. And if they let me on the boat, I would throw flies at the marlin. And I hooked over my period in Venezuela. I hooked 119 blue marlin with a fly rod and broke them all off. Never caught one.
No. Huh.
And then the 120th one, this is after 15 years down there, I caught a 60-pound blue marlin. So I knew it was possible to catch them. And by that time, Billy Pate and Harry Gray and those guys were chasing billfish on the fly. And I was, doing some fishing down there myself, and just got where it become harder to catch the blues. I mean, everybody knows about blue marlin. They're so much faster and stronger than anything else, that they were the hardest. But I had, gradually caught some different species. I caught some whites and some Atlantic sails and some Pacific sails. Anyway, I caught a striped marlin in Panama, and, I was getting, what I thought was pretty good at it. We catch 2 or 3, 4 billfish a year, and you were doing good.
What were you doing differently there, Jake? What changed after 120 fish?
The truth is that I got a small one, and the tackle we were using was still no good for this stuff. In those days, the largest reel made was like a 4-inch Finor or Billy Pate reel or Seamaster, which was a 4-inch diameter. The drags in the reels were really horrible. They were just awful. And they would work by palm and the spool and catching tarpon with them, but they were really bad tackle. And we were using the biggest rods made back then were 12 weights. And you have to remember that the only thing we had for backing on those 4-inch reels was 30-pound Dacron was the only thing we could use. And that would rot, but even so, you might be able to squeeze 200 yards or 250 yards on those reels, and a fly line. And in those days, the fly lines, the core in the fly lines were like 23 pounds. But when they extruded them, sometimes the core would break at like 18 pounds. So you'd hook a fish. You could land tarpon and stuff, but nobody was putting a lot of pressure on them. We thought we were, but as soon as you got a really fast billfish on there that took off in deep ocean, instead of the tippet breaking, sometimes the fly lines would break.
Oh, wow.
Because the fly line was weaker than the 20-pound class tippet. So I worked with different people in the industry. I went to the Costa Rica in the 1980s, and I worked down there for 6 months. I had a job that had the opportunity to go out in a panga and fish. Actually, we weren't in a panga. We were in 23-foot Mako inboard boats, but we would run offshore every day from noon till dark. And I was in 6 months. I hooked 212 different billfish on the fly rod, and I caught 11 of them.
Wow.
Holy Christ, this is awesome. We can do this stuff. But the tackle that we're using just sucks, and it doesn't work. I broke every 12-weight rod I had, and I broke all my reels, and the drags were no good. And, in those days, the hooks would come out of the box, and every hook that came out of the box was like a butter knife. You would have to sharpen it with a file before you ever cast it into a fish.
Yeah.
So since that time, everything was wrong. So when I came back, I started working with Gary Loomis, and then later with Lefty and Rick Pope, and developing rods that would work better and, heavier. And we came up with a rule with a 6-inch butt on the rod, so you could get the reel away from your gut. and I started designing rods with no snake guides, because when you got enough drag, when you wind up with a reel that has the appropriate amount of drag that you can use, that's smooth, and you bend that rod like we used to do when we were fighting these fish, the snake guides would be like pulling your fly line over a butter knife, and they'd cut the coating right off of it. So I designed fly rods without any snake guides. Snake guides are tradition, but they suck for fighting a fish with. They're good for casting, but we're not, you don't have to cast far to catch a billfish. We tease them in within 30 feet of the boat. So your cast is a short cast with a big fly.
Yeah.
So we changed the rods around, and then, I worked with different people, but I finally got hooked up with a guy named Jack Charlton, who developed the Charlton reel and later on the Mako reels. And these are reels that have a braking system like you would have in the F-18 Hornet, that's made out of carbon fiber and ceramics and stuff. And it's just, that you can know exactly what pressure is on that thing and mark that pressure, turn it off and turn it on to that spot, and you got exactly the same drag. So we figured out how to apply drag, and then we figured out about the how much pressure you can actually put on these fish, and how bending a fly rod when you're pulling on a fish takes pressure off the hook, but pointing it dead straight at the fish and holding it on, it takes the pressure off the angler and applies more pressure to the fish. And since we know exactly what the drag is, the fish, no matter what it does, can't break the tippet, because when he puts X amount of pressure on, the drag slips and the fish can pull line off. So I can now put on, with the proper reel and the proper rod and the backing and the fly lines that we developed over the years and the sharp hooks, you throw the fly at the fish, and when he eats it, you got, a much better than 50-50 chance of beating that fish with a fair fight, because you're going to wear him out, because you're using your brain and you're using physics as opposed to using your strength and trying to beat him doing something that's harder on you than it is on the fish. When you're holding a fly rod and you're bending that fly rod, every muscle in your body is working to bend the fly rod, and you have the short end of the lever, and the fish has the long end when he's on that tip. So if it's dead straight, it's like a hand line, and he can't apply any pressure to you. He can just take off whatever the reel gives him. But as soon as you start to bend it, then everything in your body is every muscle in your body is working to hold that fly rod bent.
So you can rely totally on the drag rather than the bend of the rod. When that fish starts to run, usually I think, like that rod tip's going to bend and give a little bit so you don't break them off. But you're saying you can do that just with the drag.
That's true, but you have to have the right reel. And people don't notice. Even today, there's people that are making $1,000 reels that are not repeatable, that if you turn a drag on and you measure it at say 6 pounds, well, when you're fighting a marlin, you have to start, in order to catch these fish, you got to start your fight with 1 pound of pressure exactly, or a little less, just enough to keep it from backlashing. And you got to fight that fish. That fish runs out there. And because of the system with the lines that I developed, which I'll explain to you, when that fish takes off, he runs straight away from you. He's running at 60 miles an hour if he's going full speed.
60.
Yeah, and a tarpon running away from you is running 15 or 20. And his horsepower is 10 times stronger. A 100-pound blue marlin is 10 times stronger than a 100-pound tarpon. Multiple of 10. It's incredible, the horsepower. So what you're doing is you're letting that fish go. And I developed a line system. There's a line called a Rio Leviathan that is basically a 30-foot shooting head. It's very, very narrow, skinny, as what I'm saying. So it doesn't have any drag in the water. Very skinny, and it's got a 65-pound core with 550 grains in 30 feet, which is enough that it will sink, but it won't pull a popper under the surface, but it starts to sink the minute it hits the water. So
I got you.
I use this 30-foot Rio Leviathan head, and there's other lines that I work to develop with SA and with Cortland also, but this line is, the best. And then behind that, I put a an 80-foot piece of monofilament that is basically a running line, and that's put on with 80-pound test loops, Dacron loops, loop to loop, from the fly line to the running line. That running line's 80 feet long and it's 50-pound test. And then that's loop to loop to 700 yards of gel spun backing.
700. Oh my gosh.
700 yards of 65-pound test gel spun backing. So you got 65 pounds, then you got the 50 pound on the running line, then you got 65 pounds on the fly line, then you got a 60-pound butt section on your leader that goes down to 20-pound class or 16 or 12 or whatever you want, and then you got 100-pound bite tippet to your fly. So when he eats that thing, you got that little fuse in there, like an electric line that'll blow if you get too much current going through it. So if you put too much pressure, you break them off. And then with everything strong enough, that if anything goes wrong and something breaks, and it's not the class tippet that breaks, then something happened, and then we just kept changing and improving and changing and improving until nothing ever breaks but the 20-pound. All your knots are perfect. Everything you're doing is perfect. So the only weak part is the 20-pound. Everything else is not going to ever break. So once you get to that point by designing that stuff, and then the crew gets to know what they're doing, and then you have a reel. And this is the secret. I designed the whole system about the reels that originally were Charlton reels and then the Mako reels. And there just isn't another fly reel. There's other reels that will work for sailfish and for tarpon and stuff. But when you get to the blue marlins, the Mako Charlton reel on a 1 to 10 is a 10. The second best might be the Siegler lever drag reel. Hardy makes a pretty good reel, but the second best on a 1 to 10 is a 4.
Okay. So it's an excellent reel.
So you just, anybody that's going to do this seriously winds up with Mako reel, period.
I got you.
And then they send them to me to rig with the backing and the lines and stuff. And the idea with the blue marlin is that when that fish takes off and he's running away, and you got it set at 1 pound, he's going 50, 60 miles an hour away from you when he eats it, but he can't get tight enough to pop that 20 pound at 1 pound of drag. If you set it at 2 pounds, when he hits the fly, he's going so fast, he pops the leader.
Yeah, how do you slow him down with 1 pound test, though? He could just head out to sea and be gone forever, couldn't he?
As he's going away from the boat, then the boat is going full speed chasing him.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
He gets going, and you're pointing the rod straight at him. He's just taking it off there like so that he can't get it tight and break it. And as he's taking it off, he's going straight away from the boat or going out and turning, whatever. When he gets 50 feet or 100 feet away from the boat, the fly line now, that 550 grain, 30-foot line is sinking. Now, behind that, you got that 50-pound test monofilament running line.
Okay. Yeah.
If he kicks it into overdrive or jumps, that monofilament will stretch 20 feet before your 20-pound class tippet breaks. So it's like having a rubber band in the line. So if you can remember, as a trout fisherman, protecting your light tippet with the rod bending. Remember, we don't have any rod bending. We got an exact drag going.
Yeah.
But that monofilament takes the place of the rod bending. It's a spring in there. So if he surges, he can't pop the 20 pound. And as we go out, as he goes away from the boat, even though we're backing up toward him, he's going to go out, and that line is starting to sink under him. So what he's feeling now, and I didn't notice, we were doing this out 10, 12, 15 years ago, but until 10 years ago, we didn't know why it was happening. If you hook the fish in the beginning, remember I told you I lost the first 119 fish?
Yeah.
I was trying to slow them down and fight them. And as soon as you put pressure on, then they have the ability to turn their pec fins down, and they can go straight down 300-400 yards and then make a loop and come straight to the surface like a missile and come out of the water. And that loop is going so fast, going down and up through the water, that when they hit the surface, shaking their head, the tippet breaks.
Right.
So the secret is to keep the fish on top. So as that line is sinking under them and they're running away from you fast, they feel the downward pull because the line's pulling down on their face instead of lifting up with a rod. Then they come out of the water and they jump and greyhound on the surface. Every time they come out of the water, sometimes they go 20 feet in a jump, but they're pounding their belly every time they come out of the water. So that lasts for maybe 2 or 3 or 5 minutes of that crazy stuff. But while you're watching them going nuts out there, beating themselves up, and then they get in the water, and then it's just a steady pull. Then as soon as we can get the boat going toward the fish faster than the fish has gone away, then the angler just keeps his rod tip down and drops it in tip in the water and holds it off to the side so the captain can keep backing toward the fish and turn the handle as fast as you can and steer that line back on. So we put it back on and we go, and then they take off and you point it at them, and then we put it on and they go, and then we back up and we put it on. So you're putting the slack on, they pull it off, and every time they're pulling it off, they're feeling the weight of the line, the 1 pound of pressure, and the line sinking under them, making a bow so that they're jumping and wearing themselves down. At that point, we get sometimes all the way up to the running line after 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15. But once we get up to that running line and we're 125 feet away from the fish, then you just reach over, you grab your star on the Mako reel, and you turn the reel from 1 pound to 3 pounds. So now we're still backing up toward the fish, but every time that fish goes, now he's not only feeling the weight of the line in the water and the drag of the water, but he's feeling an additional 3 times as much pressure as he did before. But he's already tired, so that just wears him down more. So by this time, he maybe does a few jumps, but he's basically just trying to go away from you. But you can actually close distance on him, but you're still not pulling on the fish. You're just putting the slack on when the boat gets closer to the fish as he's swimming along. But he's already staying on top because you already wore him down. He's not going deep, and he still feels that thing pulling down on him.
Yeah.
So next, we get up to the fly line. Now we're 45 feet from the fish's face. At this point, you turn the drag from 3 pounds to 6 pounds. So now that's a lot of pressure coming straight off of that rod. At this time, the angler is totally relaxed. The angler is just winding that slack on and then holding it loose, and the fish is pulling it off, and he's winding on. There's no bending the rod. There's no pumping. There's no tiring out the angler, but the fish is getting really tired.
Yeah.
So now when we get up there and we're backing up and we're trying to get the leader in, that's considered a caught fish if you can get that leader in. Well, when we get 20, 30 feet, you can see that fish. He's laying there on the surface and you're just moving towards him. At this time, then the angler starts applying pressure with that 6 pounds and pulling that fish. And basically what you're doing is you're backing that fish up to the boat. The fish is swimming at 1 mile an hour. The boat is following him at 1 mile an hour, and you're just putting enough pressure to back him up toward the boat. And then when we get the leader in, I turn the drag up to 10 pounds. And at this point, then we apply a lot of pressure to the fish, bring him up to the surface. Sometimes they'll make a little surge and run for like 10, 20 feet, and then lay on his side and swim to the surface. We back right up, grab the fly, take it out of the fish's mouth, get him swimming. We tow him a little bit, get that blue marlin swimming, and watch him swim away.
You just grab his bill and tow him to get him revitalized, huh? Okay.
That's correct.
You see videos where people wrap the mate wraps their hand around the line a couple times and starts hand pulling the thing. And you can't do that with 20-pound test, can you?
Well, you do it, but our mates have to learn that. I mean, that's whether you do it with a rod or with the mate grabbing the leader. As you grab that leader, it's called wiring the fish. The mate has to be. This is a team sport. It requires the angler is at the most 33% of the battle. The captain's a third, and the mates are a third. The teaser guys, and they're at the end. You fight that fish up, and we consider it a catch because you got the leader, but still you want pictures and you want video. So the mate then has to grab that thing and know exactly how much pressure he can put on there before he breaks that 20 pounds. So he's just pulling it up. Sometimes he has to let go, then moving it up, and a little more, a little more. And he's putting 19 pounds of pressure on there without breaking it. It's what I do with the tarpon every night here. I grab them and pull them up to the boat. Once I get the leader, once I can grab that leader, then I know what I can do. And you can put more pressure pulling on that than you can with a fly rod. The only way you can do equal pressure with a fly rod is if your rod is straight and you're just sliding it back. And the way I explain it to people that are fighting is that you pretend that there's no fly rod. You just got a reel on a stick.
Yeah.
And you got to wind forward and then step back. Wind forward and step back. So it's the same as hand over hand pulling it with a rope, with a hand line.
But it works.
But you got to put less than 20 pounds of pressure or the fish is gone.
Right. So Jake, have you ever had a fish take you down to the final knot, the one that ties your backing to your reel?
Yeah, I've actually had blue marlin take everything and get to that arbor knot, and if it's tied on properly, the class tippet breaks, and then you got to wind 700 yards of backing and
it's game over.
Onto the reel. Usually, your customers don't want to do that. I got to wind that on myself after they let them take it all the way up.
Yeah. What kind of comments do you get from new anglers? New people have gone through your school and get out in the boat and they hook some giant marlin or sailfish for the first time.
I don't think I've ever had anybody that wasn't amazed. Now with the sailfish, they're kind of expecting it because the story I just told you, I'm marketing this stuff and I'm telling people pretty much what's going to happen, but nobody can even imagine what's actually happening unless they're there. And even though you can hear me talking and you can see pictures, you've got like a TV screen that's a giant movie screen that is 30 feet from your face. And you've got a thing that's got more horsepower than a rocket ship that can, from a dead stop, go 20 feet in the air and make speeds of 60 mile an hour in the water without ever, touching anything. The propulsion, the horsepower and tail of these animals is great. The sailfish are just little skinny things that are the same. They're still, 8-9 feet long and 100 pounds. So they're as strong and as fast as a tarpon, and they're good. But because we're so good now at catching the marlin and stuff, we've gotten, like, I run a tournament in Guatemala every year where I have fly anglers 2 to a team that compete. And the rules of the tournament have you fishing 20-pound tippet with standard IGFA rules. And we have averaged, this tournament's like 11 years old, we've averaged catching, some years we average catching between 8 or 10 boats in the tournament, landing a sailfish every 2 minutes for the entire 4 days of the tournament.
That's down in Guatemala.
Yeah, on 20-pound tippet. We've caught,
wow,
with 7 boats one year, we caught 270 sailfish. So you're fishing 7 hours. That's 28 hours of fishing.
Gosh.
With 7 boats.
That's incredible.
And catch over 300 sailfish. Not only catch them, when we started, the rule was that the thing was that to make it more difficult was that you get 100 points for each sailfish if you get the leader inside of the rod tip. That means you caught the fish, you get 100 points. However, you get an additional bonus 50 points if you actually grab the fish and take the fly out of his mouth without breaking the tippet. So when we started doing that 12 years ago, we were getting about less than 50% of the leaders were getting the fly back without breaking the leader. So you would catch the fish, you get 100 points, but you didn't get the extra 50 bonus on half of those fish. The last few years of the tournament, we are somewhere between 95 and 99% of the fish that we get to take the fly out of their mouth and let them go, which talks about the quality of the mates and the team and the equipment.
Okay, I see.
We just kept getting better and better. the same thing with the blue marlins. You know, I caught that one blue marlin. Then it took me another 15 years to catch 9 more, and then I've caught 80 in the last 8 years.
Wow.
You know, so we kept getting better.
Yeah, no, that's great. Jake, tell me, where are the top locations for billfish, and how do they vary by season? Can you just give us a quick tour around the world of that?
Sure. Well, I fish mostly specific places. I have clients that are trying to catch a billfish royal fly slam. There's been 7 of them caught in the world in the last 10 years, and none before that. So there's 7 people that have caught, or there's 7 billfish royal slams, and that's 9 species of billfish. That's the Atlantic and Pacific blue marlin, the Atlantic and Pacific the Atlantic and Pacific sailfish, then the white marlin, the striped marlin in the Pacific, the black marlin in the Pacific, the spearfish anywhere in the world, and the swordfish. That's 9 species. So the Atlantic blue marlins, I fish. My destinations that are really good are Dominican Republic, and it used to be Venezuela. When we go there, we can't go there anymore. So mainly Dominican Republic is where I go. You can do it in other locations, but there's a lot of really good fly fish, billfish, which are blue marlin. Also Dominican and North Carolina, and sometimes in Mexico, we have really good white marlin fishing. And then for the Atlantic sailfish, I always caught them here in the Keys, but you can pretty much catch them in Mexico really good, down around Isla Mujeres, Cancun, down in that area. You catch them up in North Carolina. Florida is probably the best, and for fly fishing for them.
Okay.
Dominican is okay, but the time of the year for these Atlantic fish, that the white marlin in North Carolina are in like August, September, up into October. Down in Dominican, which is where I do most of my white marlin fly fishing, I have a vessel and a team down there, and we fish the white marlin like in May, June, and July, and the blue marlin are in January, February, March, April, and up into the beginning of May. And that's Dominican Republic, and that's where I run my schools in the Atlantic now, since they shut down Venezuela. In the Pacific side, for the Pacific sailfish, you can really catch them in Mexico. You can catch them in Panama. You catch them in Costa Rica pretty good. But the best in the world, the most sailfish any place in the world for catching them on a fly rod, these big 100-pound plus sailfish, is in Guatemala. And there's just some eddies in there and some current that it's just, the numbers there are phenomenal, and you can really catch them year round. I run my schools over there like November, December, January, February, March, just because that's the time of the year that I'm available to run those schools. And everybody wants to go there in the wintertime because it's hot there. You're near the equator. As far as blue marlin are concerned, there's a lot of places where you can catch Pacific blue marlin. I catch them in Hawaii quite a bit. The best in the world is on the Fads, which is a big canyon with mountaintops off the coast of Costa Rica, out about 100 to 200 miles out. And I run an operation there that's called the Costa Rica Blue Marlin Fly Fishing School. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and I've done close to 70 trips out there. We go out on a Monday, we fish all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and then come back to shore on Friday. We're living out there on the boat for 5 days. And since I started, we've been catching an average of just over 6 blue marlin on fly per trip. But the last year that we fished, we caught an average of 9 per trip. So we're getting better at it. And I've only had, in the 70 trips, I only had one student that did not land a blue marlin on 20-pound tippet on fly. And that's unheard of. There's never been anything like that in the world. And that's, the guy that didn't land one was probably the best angler I've ever met in my life, a fellow by the name of Larry Dalberg.
What was wrong with him then?
Larry didn't land one because he broke off 14 because he pulls too hard. And he said, Jake, I know what's going on here. I'm pulling too hard, but he says, I have to pull hard. And I said, well, you can't do it with these blues. You got to.
He's not listening.
So he made me catch a couple. He made me catch a couple so that he could do the TV show with seeing them getting caught. So I caught a couple.
Yeah. All right. So wait, back up 1 second, Jake. You said something about a fad. What is a fad?
That's called a fish aggregating device. It's a place where fish can gather to eat. It's the same as a structure in a pond, or in a river, or in a lake, or in the ocean where they build wrecks, where you have wrecks. But when you're in very deep water, that the water where I'm fishing is 18,000 feet deep, and it's a canyon that's a couple of 100 miles long and 100 miles wide, and there's several mountain ranges in there that are underwater, and the tops of some of those mountains come up to 1,500 or 1,200 feet below the surface. So we've developed a technique to build and design these weights and drop these weights and actually land them right on top of these mountains with a cable coming up with an underwater float ball and a thing that looks like a big giant top of a palm tree made out of either vinyl or carbon fiber, or you could make it out of different things, but it basically is structure in the current that is a place for small bait fish to live and hide. And then because the small bait fish immediately move in when you build these things, then the Dorado and the tuna come in there to feed on the small bait fish.
Right.
And then we know that there's Marlin coming through there, or we wouldn't even have been there in the first place. So then the Marlin come in to feed on the bait fish that we got there.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm taking you down and I'm putting you on top of one of these fads, and we sit there and we just troll around there, and there's Marlin in there feeding, and these fish that we're catching in June, July, and August at my schools are basically global. They're circumnavigating the Pacific Ocean. They're the fish that get there in June are all the way out in Hawaii by September, and they're down off of New Zealand 3 months later, and then they're over by the Galapagos 3 months later, and then they're back up in that canyon. And
wow, that's amazing.
And they're all mostly males, so they're all under 500 pounds. And then they stop in these destinations off of New Zealand and off of Hawaii, where the big females are, and they service the females. Then they continue on their circulation. And all marlin, like tarpon and many other fish, are all born as males, and they grow their first part of their life as males, and then they're hermaphrodites. They turn into females when they get to a certain size.
Okay, so the big ones are females.
Yeah, all the big ones are females. That's correct.
Okay.
When you see those granders, they're all big females. So
Jake, shift gears for a second. Talk to me about Guatemala, and why is Guatemala so good for sailfish? Those numbers are incredible.
Well, that whole coast has got sailfish all the way up and down that Pacific coast of Central America, but Guatemala has there's not like rocks and structure and stuff. And Mexico to the west and El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica and Panama to the east, they all have sailfish, but there is a lot of bait, and it's just kind of not a rocky structured bottom. It's mostly sand in Guatemala. And there's these eddies that come in from offshore, and they bring this bait in there, and they circle bait around, and it just is a place that holds bait. And ever since we started fishing there, I started fishing in Guatemala. I started my sailfish schools there in 1994. I was there fishing from 92 to 94, but there was a war going on, and after the Civil War, then we started the sailfish schools, and we built a lodge and started running my sailfish schools there. So I've literally had clients catch more than 20,000 sailfish on fly at my schools over a period of the last 29 years or 28 years, whatever it's been down there. And we don't kill them.
You don't kill them, yeah. And you keep meticulous records too, I've noticed, don't you?
Well, when I was a young guy growing up, my dad was a fisherman and he always kept a logbook. And so I just started keeping logbooks. He brought me on a trip to the Florida Keys. My dad owned a marina in New Jersey. And when I was 10 years old, he took me out of school for the month of October to deliver a boat for a rich guy from Ocean City, New Jersey to Marathon in the Florida Keys. So we were supposed to take 4 weeks before we got here, and then got the train back home, and we got here in 13 days. So we fished for 14 days before we had to get on the train and go home. And I have the logbook. I caught 31 species of fish here in the Florida Keys. That's the reason I became a tarpon fisherman, because I was down there and I saw this stuff in 1951 before it was, before there was any kind of population or anything down.
Sure.
So that's what brought me here. But, my dad had me do those logbooks. So, immediately when I started guiding, the first thing you do, you need to keep records of everything and so that you can go back and see, and under certain weather conditions, certain temperatures, water temperatures, wind directions, all of that stuff adds into fishing, inshore fishing, offshore fishing, the moons, the currents, the bait. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it, and you need to kind of know that stuff. So I know, for instance, that I can go to Hawaii and fish out of Kona with my team out there with Kevin Nakamura and the Northern Lights guys. We know about when the rarest of all the billfish is the spearfish, and we know when they're going to get together to spawn, and it's the only time anywhere in the world where you can kind of lock in and know that every day you're out there fishing for them, you're going to see one or two. So
yeah.
There's no place else to do that. So all of my guys that are trying to catch their Royal Slams, they come with me in February or March to Kona, and we fish for 8 or 10 days, and everybody gets their spearfish. And it's basically at that time of the year, it's a great time because there's a lot of small striped marlin around, and there's also a lot of small blue marlin around. And it's probably one of the best spots. I mean, although you don't raise the numbers of fish in Kona that we do in other locations, it's still one of the best spots in the world where you can catch a grand slam. 3 species of billfish in the same day on fly.
Wow. In Kona, it drops off really fast, that race. You don't have to motor so long to get out to where the good fishing is. Is that correct?
That's correct. As soon as you come out of the marina, I've caught blue marlin, 100 yards outside of the marina.
How far do you have to go in Guatemala to get to those sailfish grounds?
Well, when we set the records, where the record I think is 124 in one day on bait, and 76 in one day on fly in one boat, and we were fishing 6 miles offshore. So
that's not too bad.
We leave the dock every morning at 7, and we got to be back in at 5 in the marina. So if they're in close, if they're 6 miles off, you get an extra 2 or 3 hours of fishing, which can amount to an extra 20 or 30 fish if it's good.
Absolutely.
As opposed to running, all of our fishing in Guatemala we're never more than 50 or 55 miles from the marina. You go out 50 miles or go 50 miles to the left or 50 miles to the right, but you're in that oblong along the coast there. And usually somewhere in there is a school of bait, and there is the overall mother load of sailfish. So it'll be good. We'll fish, 2 hours to the west. The next day we find those fish in an hour and 45 minutes to the west. And then the next day there'll be an hour and 15 minutes to the west. And then within 2 more days, they're going to be right out front. And then they're gone to the east, and then further to the east, and then further to the east. And then all of a sudden they're out of our zone. And then all the boats go in different directions until somebody finds the new school. And then we all go there. So it might be a couple days in between before we're getting big numbers. And then all of a sudden we find them and we're back in them again.
And you were telling me before the show how you fish these bait balls. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, the bait balls, are, things that I do in certain areas, like, here in the Keys or down in Mexico. You can see these bait balls on the surface, and you see fish circling them down in. We do it a lot down in Magdalena Bay, Mexico, which has the best fly fishing for striped marlin in the world, and that's where more marlin have been caught on fly there than any place in the world. And there's striped marlin, which are smaller and less powerful than the blues, but bigger and more powerful than the sailfish, or as big as the sailfish and much more powerful. But the numbers down there over the last few years are incredible. And another place where I have really great striped marlin fishing is Galapagos. And both of those places, the striped marlin find these schools of sardines or different kinds of greenies, and they get these schools. Well, there'll be 10 million baits in that school, and there'll be hundreds and hundreds of marlin circling them, or sailfish circling them, and there'll be other stuff in there. There'll be seals and other things in there, but mainly the marlin and the tunas are circling them, and then they get them all balled up in a ball, and then they slash through them and grab baits. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. One is you can actually back your boat up right to that bait ball, and you can cast a fly on a sinking line that resembles that bait in the bait ball. Mm-hmm. And as that fly line, as the sinking line pulls that bait down, you cast across the bait ball to the other side, and as it sinks, you just hold the line where it is. So as it goes down, it's pulling the line down through the bottom of the bait ball as it sinks. And as it's coming in, when it comes out the bottom of that bait ball, it looks like a wounded straggler. And one of those fish peels off and nails that sucker as it's coming out the bottom.
Oh, no kidding.
So that's a different way to feed them than actually teasing them up and casting the fly to them.
Okay. And what kind of flies are you using? What are the size, shapes, and colors of these things?
Well, we used to use, bait fish looking flies, just buy a fly that looked like a mullet or a mackerel or something. But over the years, what we found is that we're using teasers. So we're towing these teasers, which is basically a lure. And inside of that lure, we sew in a piece of bait, either a ballyhoo or a strip of squid or a pork rind or something that has a fishy taste to it. Mm-hmm. And you tow these things anywhere from 5 miles an hour to 9 miles an hour. Oh, and as you're towing them around, you have the boat is going, and it's just like you're doing trolling for regular fish. You're trolling these things behind the boat, but there's no hooks in them. So the marlin and the sailfish and the billfish are swimming around down deep looking for food. They're constantly 24 hours looking for food. And they hear this noise, and they look up, and what they see is this white water in the surface that is all frothing and everything. And that basically looks to them like a school of porpoises or a school of tuna or something eating on the surface.
Okay.
It's actually made by the propellers and the white water coming out the back of the boat. And the noise that they hear, the harmonics of the boat, if it's a pleasant sound, they come up to investigate. Wooden boats, diesel engines make a more pleasant sound to the fish than fiberglass boats or metal boats in gas engines. The sound is different. They're not as good. Not that they don't work, but over a period of time, the boats made out of wood work a lot better for catching billfish than boats made out of other materials because of the harmonics, the sound that it makes, and it's more pleasing to the fish's ears. So the fish actually moves up to investigate, and they see that white water, which is the wake from the propellers. And as they get closer, they see that there's these 2 or 3 stragglers swimming along, trying to keep up with the feeding school.
Oh, okay.
So obviously to them, that looks like something that they could attack and catch and eat without going into the white water. So they'll come up behind it and come right up to the surface, and we'll see them. So when they come up, they'll actually grab that teaser, and they get a taste of that bait that's sewed in there, and then we pull it out of their mouth. So when they pop up, you get your fly line ready. The angler gets his fly line ready. The teaser guys bring the other teasers in and got that one out there. And then they're bringing that in pretty fast, and the fish is chasing it. And you can see the fish getting excited as they chase it, and their colors are lighting up, and they're coming right at you.
Jake, what does that mean? Their colors light up, so the fish actually change color before your eyes?
Yeah, the fish look black in the water, but when they get excited, they get all these reds and greens and blues and yellows, and they light up. You know, like the striped marlin look like a powder blue electric neon all the way around the whole fish. And they all have different unique coloring, but they light up, and that means that they're getting excited. They're getting ready to eat. Their fins get up tight, and they're ready to go, and they're charging in. And they're coming in after this teaser. So you got your fly stripped off 25 feet from the rod tip to the fly, and you throw it right in the white water behind the boat. So it's just dragging back there, and you're standing in the aft port corner of the vessel with the fly rod in your hand, and you're holding that line, and the fish is back 50 feet coming in fast. As the fish gets like 40 feet out, the captain turns the boat hard to the starboard, which means that as the boat turns, he pulls it out of gear. So now the fish is being teased. Instead of coming up right up against the white water in the back of the boat, he's coming across the clear water off to the starboard side because you made that turn. So as that fish is coming in, you can see him coming in, chasing that thing. When the captain pulls the boat out of gear, he yells down from the bridge. He's in charge. He says, "Cast!" You pick up that fly rod and you throw the fly across the transom and out into that clear blue water. As the fly is in the air and unlooping and coming down to the water, my teaser guy takes that rod, which is low, and he yanks that teaser up out of the water and grabs it as it flies into the boat, just as your fly hits the water. And the fish, who is so excited, sees that fly, and he sees that it's stopped and laying there on the surface. It's just sitting there, and he knows that he whacked it with his bill, and he just knocked it out and stunned it, and he's got to eat it before it takes off again. So he makes a quick circle, comes up, opens his mouth 25 feet from you, and sucks that whole big fly right into his mouth and takes off.
You watch this whole
thing. And as soon as he does, he feels that boom. But you're looking at this thing. You don't ever get one of these fish that you're not looking at the inside of its mouth when they eat the fly.
Wow.
A lot of times they come right out of the water and pounce on the fly.
Wow, no kidding. And what do you strip set, or do they hook themselves, or how do you hook them?
Well, with the billfish, depending on the fish that you're going, if it's a blue marlin, your drag is set at 1 pound. And they're going so fast that if you have the drag set at 2 pounds, you're going to break the 20-pound class tippet.
Yeah.
So when the fly hits the water, they circle it and they'll hit it. And they hit it so hard. We have tube flies that I've designed that have a popper head on the front of them. They're all made out of feathers, not hair, so that they don't tangle around the hooks. And then you have a 9-aught hook back in there. And when he grabs that thing in his mouth, and he's going so fast that 9-aught Gamakatsu octopus hook snags the inside of his mouth, and he hooks himself. He's gone so fast going away.
I see.
On the other hand, the sailfish and the striped marlin and stuff, we have the drag set at 6 pounds because they're not fast enough to pop that 20-pound test. So you got it set at 6 pounds. When they hit that thing, you're not strip setting at all. When you make your cast, you want to have it's the reason I only have 25 feet of line and the leader out there is because when you pick that thing up and it hits the water, you want that line to be dead straight, and the rod is pointing straight at the fish. Okay. So when he eats it, we actually tease them so they eat it going away from you. So he hits it, and immediately as it goes into his mouth, the line comes tight because it's already tight, and he's hitting it. The boat's gone one way drifting, and he's gone the other way. And when he hits that thing, that hook snags him inside the mouth, stings him, and he feels that 6 pounds of pressure. And you just pretend you got a hand line. You don't raise the rod. You don't do anything. You just pull about a 6-inch tug until the handle turns. When that handle turns, that means you just applied 6 pounds of pressure onto the point of that hook and drove it into his jaw. And he goes crazy, jumping and running around and crazy. And the boat captain keeps the fish from jumping in the boat and killing you. And he's just moving the boat. And then when the fish takes off, he's dragging that 6 pounds of drag behind him.
Yeah.
In the case of the Marlin, it's a little different. We're letting them run and wearing themselves out as they go away from the boat.
Have you had a fish jump on the boat? I've seen videos of that occasionally.
Yes.
Oh, have you? Yeah. What do you do?
I mean, there's been a lot of time with sailfish where the fish is coming in and he's going to spear the angler. Yeah. And I just step in front of him, or my mate steps in front of him, and it's kind of like if you've got a football player running at you, you just put both hands on the side of the fish and you push sideways.
Oh, seriously?
And instead of coming into the boat, they just go right over the gunnel and out.
You literally block the fish, like Secret Service guy taking the bullet. You block the fish.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh my God!
You can't let the fish kill your angler. You don't get a tip.
Yeah, then they can't tip you.
Exactly.
Oh my God!
Exactly. It's a business. I mean, you don't want to kill your angler. He's the guy that's going to pay you.
They're your business partners. You can't do that. Man, Jake, I got to get down here and do this. This sounds absolutely incredible, Jake. I got to ask you. We're running out of time here, but I got to ask you, Jake. Does it ever get old?
Well, the truth is that I'm 79. I'm going to be 80, and every morning I wake up before I do my morning exercise and my walk, and I am so excited about going fishing that I start shaking.
That's great. That's awesome.
Every morning. What wakes me up? I lost my wife in 1991, so I'm single.
Sorry to hear that.
I've had a few girlfriends, but I'm a single guy. So my whole life, where everybody else has, a bunch of family and stuff, my whole life is waking up and thinking about fishing and taking people out and sharing my knowledge and catching people big fish that jump on a fly rod.
Yeah, how fun is that? Wow. What have you?
No fun at all.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. What have you learned from life, from your fishing adventures?
Well, I mean, I've learned that sharing brings me pleasure. I'm a physics guy, so I do things, I figure out things and I study them until I work a system out that works, whether it's building and designing a reel or a drag system or a rod or knots or connections or sharp hooks or whatever it is. I work until I get that part so it's never going to fail.
Yeah.
And then once you get everything that's not going to fail, then the only thing that can fail is your 20-pound tippet or your 12-pound or 2-pound, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And if that fails, that means that the angler made a mistake.
Yeah.
If nothing else fails, I did my job.
Yeah.
And then the rest of my job is teaching that angler not to make the mistake and losing that fish. I believe that we can catch every one of those fish. Yeah. I mean, every time I hook one, I know I'm going to catch it. And my team knows I'm going to catch it. The team in Guatemala that started catching these blue marlin with me when we started, I think they saw me land 12 billfish out of 12 when we first started, when I was teaching them.
Yeah.
I landed 12 out of 12. And then finally I got this blue marlin on and it jumped twice and spit the hook.
Yeah.
And I looked up at the captain and he's like, got his hands out shaking his head. And he says, "What the hell happened?" And I says, "Well, the fish spit the hook." Man.
That's a high.
He says, "I never saw you miss a fish. I never saw you miss a fish. What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
So I just, I've learned that I personally love sharing my knowledge with people, and it has helped me. I've got 3rd and 4th generation clients that the families have been fishing with me for 60 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I've got all of my friends and all of my companions, other than my family, are all people from the fishing industry and the boating industry that I've been involved with all my life. And I've learned that some people are born with this gene and some people just think it's crazy. It's other people,
agree. Yeah.
hit a ball around and into a hole and then take it out and hit it some more. That don't do anything for me.
I'm with you.
You know.
Well, all right, Jake, where do you go for vacation?
Well, I take off usually when I come home from Costa Rica after my Marlin season. I usually come home for a couple of days, and then I jump on a plane and I go to Alaska and I chase 30-inch wild rainbow trout.
So you go.
And I don't work. I don't work in Alaska. I go to Alaska to fish. That's my vacation. I go up there to fish for rainbow trout.
Well, Jake, thank you. Gosh, this has been an amazing whirlwind tour. I'm really just blown away by this. And thank you for sharing. And I hope it brought you some pleasure today, because we're going to reach a lot of anglers with your message of how fun and exciting this bill fishing is. How can people get in touch with you if they want to explore, coming on a trip?
Well, basically, the best way is to talk to me. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to talk to people, but the best way to communicate with me is on the telephone or in person. And I can be reached at this number. It works all over the world. It's 305-872-6060. Or, you can text me or you can contact me at keysjake@aol.com is my email. And I do have a website. It's not always up to date. I build it myself, and it's not something that you can book trips on, but I have a lot of records that go back for many years that you can go on there and see pictures and videos and read about different people's experience at my different fishing destinations. And that's, it's a pretty complicated website, so you need to write it down. It's called jakejordan.com.
Okay. Pretty easy. Very good. Well, folks, thank you for listening. And there you have it. You can give Jake a call and explore a trip with him. Jake, once again, thanks for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Steve. I hope I taught a few things to your people and excited some people and lit a fire under some that might have that gene that needs to catch a giant fish that jumps on a fly rod.
You lit a fire under me. This sounds awesome. So, folks, we'll put a bunch of pictures of, Jake and all these fish changing colors and whatnot out on the Destination Angler Facebook and Instagram site. So check that out. As always, you can DM me with any comments or suggestions. Email me too at shag50@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to give us a share, like, or follow on your social media, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.